Welcome to chapter 1 of the book of Zechariah, a book filled with many prophecies and end-time events being mentioned, and current events at the time of Zechariah. The focus of Zechariah that I like to put on these seminars is, one, what led Zechariah to be slain by the Jews between the altar and, as Jesus mentions in Matthew 23:35, he says, so that should come upon you all the just blood being poured out upon the earth, from the blood of Abel, the just one, unto the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah. And then in Luke 11:51, from the blood of Abel unto the blood of Zechariah, the one perishing between the altar and the house. Yes, I say to you, it will be required from this generation. Then, secondly, focus is on the apocalyptic passages that will affect a future to us today. Some of the prophecies are for the time close to Zechariah. In verse 1, we begin, and it says, in the 8th month of the 2nd year unto Darius came to pass the word of the Lord to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, son of Iddo the prophet. Now, I always thought when it mentions Darius, that meant that Zechariah was in the country where Darius was ruling, which would have been Persia. But apparently that's not the case, because it mentions that Zechariah was in Jerusalem during the rebuilding of the temple, but yet he refers to the time of Darius. And the word came to pass, the word of the Lord to Zechariah. Now, the son of Berechiah, son of Iddo the prophet. Now, is this Iddo the prophet, or is it Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, son of Iddo, comma, the prophet? I think I should have put a comma after the Iddo, because I think it's talking about Zechariah. And we know that Zechariah was a Levite, and he was a prophet. The word of the Lord to Zechariah. Now, how did this word come to Zechariah? Was it through a vision, or was it through an angel, dream, and so forth? And we'll go into that and we'll find out. The Lord was provoked to anger by your fathers. So now here it says the Lord. It's not I, the Lord, was provoked to anger, but the Lord was provoked to anger. So I believe the word of the Lord came through the angel. And we'll meet the angel a little later. The Lord was provoked to anger by your fathers, a great anger. So right away, Zechariah is starting out this book with a condemnation of the fathers of the people that were at that time during the rebuilding of the temple. He's angry at your fathers, to the people he's standing by. Well, that probably didn't go over with them too well. And he says, a great anger. And you shall say to them, thus says the Lord of the Namion. The dynamite is a transliteration, is the derivative, Lord of the forces. So this is a military type of a thing, the Lord Yahweh of the forces. Turn to me, says the Lord of the forces, in the imperative, turn to me. So this is not something from the past. This is something that the Lord is telling Zechariah to tell the people then, to turn to me. So apparently they were coming back and rebuilding the temple, but not necessarily turning to him. I look at Israel in 1948, became a country. Temple hasn't been built yet. I believe it will. But the same thing probably, turn to me, says the Lord of the forces, and I shall be turned towards you. But did they? Well, they may have did it for a while, but then eventually they were destroyed by Rome. Says the Lord of the forces, I shall be turned towards you. Zechariah as we mentioned, was a Levite. And back in verse 1, it mentions son of Berechiah. Well, maybe it's not here. Someplace about Jeremiah, the 70 years. I was thinking it's in 1. But we'll go ahead and can then go into 4. And do not become as your fathers, whom the prophets accused them. Well, where is that? Well, you can go through Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the prophets. The condemnation against their fathers was superabundant. It's overwhelming. And the same thing with the Jewish people from the very beginning. After Jacob became Israel, he had the 12 sons. And then when they were leaving Egypt, after they grew to a large population, they left, but they didn't like what was happening with Moses, and they were constantly complaining, wanting to go back. But yet God at one time was going to wipe Israel away and start a new nation with Moses. So this has been going on. They were accused constantly by the prophets. They wanted a king. Samuel came against what they wanted, but yet the Lord said, well, let them have a king. The prophet Samuel was a prophet, and then during the kings, there were prophets telling them what to do and what not to do, but yet half the time they never listened. Whom the prophets accused them. The prophets beforehand saying, thus says the Lord of the forces, turn from your wicked ways and from your wicked practices. In the imperative, turn from them. So they were obviously they were doing this before, and in Ezekiel 3:18, it almost has that word. It says, turn from your wicked ways. So Ezekiel, you can go through Ezekiel, mainly has this theme of turning from the wicked ways more than the other prophets. And your wicked practices. Well, what were the wicked practices that they were doing? Well, they were idolaters. They had idols, different types of idols. They started off coming out of Sinai, and they had the calf, the golden calf, when Moses was on the mountain too long, and they made the molten calf. And then they went into Baal Peor and had sexual rituals with these people, fornication, and then they ended up with a corrupt priesthood. We know that from Samuel with his son, Eli's sons, Samuel's sons. The priesthood became corrupt. Not all, of course. Then in the kings, you see false prophets arising, telling the kings what to do, that it was okay to go attack somebody when actually it wasn't. They were going to be destroyed, but the false prophets telling people what they wanted to hear. You had corrupt kings who walked away from God and set up idols, altars for other gods, starting with Solomon, basically. They started to forsake the law. I think it was the reforms of Josiah, where they realized that they were supposed to obey or have the Passover, and they hadn't had it for who knows how long. So they had a Passover, so they weren't obeying the law. The law was found somewhere stuck between the wall when they were remodeling the temple. So, and then after, right at this time that Zechariah is writing, they were developing the oral law, because basically in Babylon, because they no longer had a temple. They still had the Torah, but they couldn't do any of the sacrifices. So to be Levitically pure was an impossible thing, because if you did make a mistake in having eating something unclean or whatever, doing something unclean, you have no way of wiping it away. There was no more sacrifices. So what did they do? They invented the oral law, which is around today. In time of Jesus, this is what Jesus came against, the oral law that these men were starting to develop right at this time with Zechariah. And so this is probably another reason that they wanted to kill Zechariah, because he's not wanting them to do these things. And then another wickedness was committing harlotry with the nations, going after other nations for their help, when God said not to do that. And he says, continues Zechariah, and they listened not, and did not take heed to listen to me, says the Lord. Your fathers, where are they? And the prophets, shall they live into the eon? Are they going to be around anymore? Furthermore, do you receive my words and my laws, as many as I give charge by my Spirit to my bondmen, the prophets, overtaking your fathers? Now, he's a prophet, or he's asking the people at that time, are you going to listen to the prophets now? And they come. The prophets did come, and we know that John the Baptist was a prophet. They didn't listen to John the Baptist. They ended up killing John the Baptist. Then Stephen came and he condemned them. He said in Acts 7:52-54, well, which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed the ones pre-announcing concerning the advent of the just one. And hearing these things, they were sawed through in their heart and gnashed their teeth against him, and they ended up killing Stephen, with Paul watching this going on. So for Zechariah to lose his life as a prophet, Jesus says this is what happens if you bring the prophecy to the people, to the Jews here, then they kill the prophets. And they have a history of doing that. Go to Israel and tell them, the people there, about Jesus. Good luck. Especially if you go to certain places, you might be killed. So they still don't want to hear today, even though they have come back like they have many times. And they answered and said, well, as the Lord of the forces deployed to do to us according to our ways and according to our practices, so he did to us. Oh, well, this is the way it is. They're going to go back to their ways. So what? And then it changes. I have a vision of the 4 horses. I probably do next edition. I'll take out the vision because it doesn't say a vision, although he saw. So indirectly it was a vision, but it wasn't. If it was a true vision, it wasn't. The word is not used. And so in verse 7, it says, on the 4th and 20th day in the 11th month, this is the month Shabbat. Now that's his Hebrew calendar. In the 2nd year unto Darius, the ruler of Persia, came to pass the word of the Lord to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, and so, who is this? Who is talking? And it's an angel. We find out speaking in verse 9. And what is that? The word say? And it says, I saw the night, and behold, a man having mounted a reddish horse, and this one stood in the midst of the shady mountain. So at night, nikta, nocturnal, comes from that word. So this is something on the negative side as I see it. It's not something wonderful in the sun, but it's at night, something dark, the shady mountains. He was mounted on a horse, but apparently he got off and stood in the midst of the mountains, and behind him were reddish horses, and white and spotted. So it wasn't just 4 horses, it was many horses. So that's incorrect, the vision of the 4 horses. It should be the horses. People make fun of me because I say horse instead of horse. I don't even know how to hardly say horse. But anyway, so he sees these horses. Try it. And I said, what are these, O Lord? And it's not Yahweh, but a person of importance, Lord, L-O-R-D. If it was Yahweh, in the Hebrew, it wasn't Yahweh. If it would have been capital O, capital O-R, capital D. And the angel said to me, so now here we see, it's an angelos, angel, transliteration, the one speaking to me, I'll show to you what these are. And the man answered, the one standing in the midst of the mountains that had been on the horse, with the horses behind him, and said to me, well, these are whom the Lord sent out to travel about the earth. That's all these horses, and they went to the different directions. And I should have written down, but someplace it mentions about the horses, in the different colored horses going, some to the north. I believe it was Daniel, but I'm not sure. It's in my book, Entities of the Book of Revelation. If you went into there, you went into the horses, you'll find where that's at. These horses are different colored horses. And they answered to the angel of the Lord, to the one standing in the midst of the mountains, the ones on all these horses, and said, we've traveled about the earth, and behold, all the earth is inhabited and tranquil. And the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of the forces, until when shall you in no way show mercy on Jerusalem? Now, I forgot to... There's a place that mentions Jeremiah here, and I guess I've missed it again. But when you're not going to show mercy on Jerusalem and the cities of Judah in which you were enraged. Here it is, over this 70th year. So this 70th year is mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. I thought I had written down where that was, but I guess I didn't. So it's three places towards I'm not sure where it was. Towards the end, I think, of Jeremiah, were the three mentions of the three places. And the Lord responded to the angel speaking with me, saying with good words and comforting words. And the angel speaking with me said to me, well, shout aloud, saying, thus says the Lord Almighty, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with great zeal. He is zealous for Jerusalem and Zion. It was rebuilt. Jerusalem was rebuilt, and the temple was rebuilt. After the 70th year, the beginning of the rebuilding where Jeremiah is. This is something God wanted. But yet, that temple in Jerusalem were destroyed by the Romans. So just because he says at this place here, I believe he's always jealous for Jerusalem and Zion, but that doesn't mean the people do the right things in this as a response to his zeal for Jerusalem. Jesus cried over Jerusalem, 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 one that killed the prophets. How I would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you would not. Verse 15, and I am provoked with great anger by the nations joining and making an attack, because I indeed was provoked to anger a little, but they joined in making attack for evils. So God destroyed Jerusalem for the 70 years to bring him back, and he was angry with them, but now he's provoked at the nations that came against Jerusalem, because they did it because they hated Jerusalem. The same today. Jerusalem in 2017 is going through an upheaval now with the Palestinians, because there were three soldiers who weren't Jewish, they were Druze, Israeli soldiers on the Temple Mount were killed, and so they put metal detectors at the gates, and now the Muslims don't want to come in, and there's a big brouhaha going on. I don't know what's going to happen, but still problems, people against Jerusalem. It's a recurring deja vu. On account of this, thus says the Lord, I will turn towards Jerusalem in compassion, and my house shall be rebuilt in it, says the Lord of the forces, and a measure shall be stretched out upon Jerusalem. So now this house was rebuilt and was destroyed by the Romans, and there's going to be another temple being built, I believe, during the beast, and it's going to be destroyed in the 1,000-year reign of Christ, Jerusalem will be rebuilt again. A temple will be built because it mentions in the book of Ezekiel, in the last 10 chapters, how this man, the 10th chapter, the last 10 chapters, which would be 40 to 49, the man stretching out has a measuring rod over Jerusalem. So Jerusalem has been measured more than once. And it will be measured again. And then it says, shout aloud again, saying, thus says, now actually the exclamation should be right there. Shout aloud again, saying, thus says the Lord of the forces, shall yet cities be dispersed for good things, yet shall cities be dispersed for good things, and the Lord shall show mercy still on Zion, and shall select still Jerusalem. So even though the people revolt in different times with Jerusalem and the temple, God comes back and rebuilds the city, rebuilds the temple, and he will do that again and again, and then the new Jerusalem will come down, which doesn't have a temple, and that's in the 22nd chapter of Revelation. Now the vision of the four horns, and there is no place that says a vision. I looked, so it should be the four horns. And I lifted my ophthalmos, eyes, ophthalmologist is a derivative from that word, and I looked. And behold, four horns. These were the horns like on an animal. The horns were on the altar of incense, and David's general was to be killed by Solomon, and he went in and grabbed the horns, Joab, but yet they still killed him, even though he had grabbed a hold of the four horns of the incense. And I said to the angel speaking with me, what are these, O Lord? And he said to me, well, these are the horns scattering Judah, their nations, and Israel and Jerusalem, as it'll say. So they scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Now, and the Lord showed to me four fabricators. And I said, what are these come to do? And he said to me, saying, oh, these are the horns having scattered Judah. And they broke Israel, and not one of them lifted his head. And these are come forth to sharpen them in their hands. The four horns are four nations lifting up their horn against the land of the Lord to scatter it. Now, it could be that the four horns here are four countries in the past, but it seems like to me it's talking about a future event. So if that was the case, it would be leaving out Nebuchadnezzar, and so that would leave, if it was a future to this time, could be the Antiochus Epiphanes, the ruler of the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire, and he pillaged Jerusalem and placed an altar to the pagan god Zeus within the temple. And Antiochus IV Epiphanes became ruler of the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire, and he began to force the Greek culture into Judea and outlawed the Sabbath, circumcision. He sacked the city and erected an altar to Zeus in the second temple after plundering it. So that could be one of these four horns. And it could be the Roman legion in 70 A.D., could be the second, destroying the Roman legions take the city by storm and destroy the temple in 70 A.D., or it could be, which I believe it is, four nations in the future. It talks about that in the book of Revelation, in the book of entities of the book of Revelation, gets into the, basically it doesn't say the four nations, but it has the seven kingdoms, and three are destroyed and four are left, and they come against the Babylon, which is, I believe, Jerusalem, and it goes into it, and that was in our book, in our seminars in the book of Revelation. You can go into the entities book and find out about the horns and how it relates here, and I believe Zechariah is talking about a future apocalyptic time here, not something that was in the past or Rome or Antiochus, but that's my opinion. The next chapter, we go into the man with the cord measure. So we measured the measuring line for this going into Jerusalem. Happens again in Revelation and in Ezekiel. So we'll go into all these into the next chapter 2, and I hope you'll join us in chapter 2, and God bless.